Um, Hi, I'm Pratyush. Man, honestly, I'm having a bit of nerves to be on this stage. So, anyways, let's get started. So, let me reintroduce myself. I was a algorithmic trader once for about a couple of years with one of the most reputed firms in the industry. I quit my job in 2011 and shifted back to my hometown and have been teaching since then. And I'm here to talk about why I do what I do. So, the real reasons. So, one of the things which happen to you when you shift from finance to something like education is that people automatically assume that you have social motivations. So, Times of India quoted me as a social worker, and I have had people calling me as as a social being. But that is not my motivation actually. What I believe social workers do is that they work for the benefit of society. They want to make a change for the society. That's their primary motivation. They want to make the world a better place. Not me. My motivation behind teaching is that I love teaching. I really love children. I'm not noble in my intentions. Basically, if I loved stealing, I would have been a thief. So, yeah, my motivation for teaching is the simplest possible one. It gives me happiness. I don't do it for any other purpose, period. I do it for my own sake. It's selfish. Now, what I want to talk about is happiness per se. You see, I believe that happiness is underrated and quote unquote overpriced. I believe that the only thing which matters to us is happiness, as in we don't really want money because we want money. We want money because money saves us from unhappiness. We don't want power, we don't want fame because they are the ultimate goals. We want power and fame because they make us happy. It feels good to be the center of attention. It strokes your ego. So it makes us happy. So, when you tell people that, okay, do whatever makes you happy, it's often misinterpreted. People come and question, okay, so what I want to do is I want to get drunk and watch movies. So I should do that, right? And then, yeah, it makes me happy. So here is what I think about it. Here's what I tell my students. So I think there are two types of happiness. We can have happiness in two ways. One is by consuming something, happiness by consumption, and the other is happiness by doing something, the do what you love thing. So, most of the times when you talk about happiness, people primarily assume that you mean happiness by consumption. So, watching movies, TV series, liquor, parties, they are all happiness by consumption. You feel good in the short term, you feel excellent in the short term, but do it every night and you feel hollow. It's not fulfilling. It's something is missing over there. What's more desirable for me is the happiness which I find when I do what I love. Now, when I talk to an audience which comprises of college students and high school students, it's a bit presumptuous to understand that they have an understanding of what is it like to do what you love. So, yeah, it's like trying to explain the color green to a blind person. How do you explain it to somebody who has not felt the boredom of it? So, I'll perhaps leave that question to the time when you figure out okay, I need to revisit my life and think about what really makes me happy. So I'll instead skip to the point where I am asked the question, how exactly do I figure out what I love? There are a lot of people who realize that they need to figure out what they love, but they don't know how to get started. So I am perhaps going to share how I did it and generalize it. So my answer to this is do some arts. Do art. Whatever you think is an art, do it. So let me tell you a story about it. About 3-4 months back, I had my cousin visiting me. He's like 6-7 years old, and he got hold of my guitar. So he started playing with it, and about an hour later he came back to me and said, "See this new tune, and it's so brilliant." So it was so brilliant that he didn't even touch any fret, and he was just poking around. At that time I dismissed the event very lightly, as we just laughed at his innocence. But being a teacher, I am used to looking back at events and seeing life lessons in them. So I looked back at this thing and thought, this guy was perhaps happy because he thought what he was doing was an art. It's not because it was an art, it's not because it was quality art, it was because what he thought that it was an art. He believed what he did was an art. And just like that, I had a bulb going on, blink. So in a moment I had my whole philosophy cleared up. I love teaching. I think of teaching to be an art. I love programming. I think of programming to be an art. And I love maths. And I think of maths to be an art. So everything which I love to do is basically something which I think of as an art. Now, when I was discussing this talk with my friends and family, my brother actually raised an objection. He said, "You have encompassed everything into an art. So what is it that is an art actually? What do you call an art?" Now, I can give a reason to that. As in, the question makes it sound as if there is an objective answer to it. And you can give statements like it should have a concave upwards learning curve, it should have a feedback mechanism, the technical terms. The real thing is it does not matter what is an art. The problem is not in the answer, the problem is in the question. The real question which I believe is that instead of asking what is an art, you should ask what is it that I think is an art. It's not necessary that what I think to be an art is the same that what he thinks to be an art. And it's not required either. If you want to derive pleasure by doing something, you have to figure out what is it that you find to be artful, what is it that you find to be excellent. So, and this is not a question which anybody from outside can answer to you. It's a question which you have to answer by yourself. People, those who know you, can give you suggestions. For example, I know a few people whom I suggest to try teaching. They'll like it because I know them. But in the end, the answer has to come from you. You have to keep trying. It's not hard to keep trying. What's hard actually with people getting started is the start. People when they start doing what they want to do, people when they start doing what they love, they start with all the wrong motivations in the first place. So one thing which people do is okay, I want to play guitar. How long would it take for me to play this song? How long would it take me to become Jimi Hendrix? People start writing, and then they dream of how long would it take for me to become a published writer. And these are again motivations based on consumption. You are not doing art because You're not doing what you're doing because you love the process. You are doing it because your focus is on the result. And this is what happens with education as well. So basically, when you are students, if your focus is on the result, the subjects suck. It's pathetic actually. You don't want to study. Why am I studying? What am I studying? But once you try to think of the problems as something which is given to you to solve, you start realizing the art in them. So the moment you start thinking of your subjects not as something which somebody tells you, but something which should come from the inside, it is then that the education part, the studying part becomes interesting. So, it's a different thing when you teach maths, you teach theorems, and it's a different thing when you learn problem solving. I don't teach maths, I teach problem solving. Another mistake which people do when they start off with arts is to set up a lot of expectation with it. They want happiness on day one. Arts are not, doing what you love is not about happiness on day one, it's about happiness 5 years later. You might do something today, you might like it for a week, and then you would shift back to doing something which you might realize that it's not what you wanted. So it's fine, go ahead, do something different. So one thing which, this thing when people do that, they give up. It's alright to give up. You need to figure out what you love, and you need to, when you do that to figure out, there is absolutely no issue in deciding, okay, that's not what I want to do, and let's move on. Yet another thing is that the desired product of art. When you are doing something which you love, you are not doing it. You are doing it to be in the zone. The zone is when you're so oblivious to everything else that you are completely engrossed in what you are doing. It's the closest thing which I have come across which is bliss on earth. So that zone thing, when you see an artist, when you see a musician playing on stage, it's like, I want to reach that stage. But when you play guitar, it's not the same. It's because you're running after that. Don't run after the zone. It will come back to you when you relax and you're really enjoying your art. So don't do it for the sake of society. Don't do it for the sake of money. Don't do it for the sake of fame, power. Do it, and don't do it for the sake of happiness either. Do it for the sake of art itself. Figure out one problem, just one problem where you think you can do better than what's being observed right now. When I started teaching, I just had one moment where I figured, okay, this way of teaching is rubbish and I should perhaps try, give it a try. I started trying, and it just clicked. I wanted to try, I just I didn't think of it back then that I'll switch to teaching full time somewhere in my life. I just thought of it, okay, here is a problem which is really interesting and which is worth solving for its own sake. The other thing which so this is like the yin part of arts, where you are supposed to not run after the results and not do stuff which is material in nature, but do something as for its spiritual value. Arts are something which have spiritual value. The yang part of it is कि people start getting better at art. When they start getting better at art, they tend to think of it as something very noble. So, for example, when I'm teaching, I can very easily say कि okay, it is something very noble and I should not take money for it. You can play guitar, you can write, and you can think, okay, this is something which I should do for free. Okay. There's one thing which I have realized in my life, that chasing money is bad, but poverty is worse. So don't dismiss your art for the as a source of the byproduct. I think of money as a byproduct, and there is absolutely nothing wrong in going, part professional, trying to make some money out of it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with it. And when you switch back to doing this, there is one thing which I can tell you from personal experience. No matter how much you earn, okay, I had like one of the best jobs in the industry, and no matter how much you earn, you will always feel afraid. So I'm really afraid. Basically, if I look at it from my perspective, I might fail. I might have to go back to doing something which I don't like and feed my family. I got backup plans in place and backup of backups. The thing is that and in the near future it might be the case that I might have to take my words back. But the thing is that right now I am taking a risk. I am chasing my dreams, and I am not doing it for the sake of money. I am not doing it for the sake of society, and I am not doing it for the sake of country. I am doing it for the sake of my own happiness, and I am doing it for the sake of my own home. So I sincerely request to go ahead and play. That's it. Thank you.